and sentimental, perhaps too much for his own good. The unopened gift, still wrapped in its faded Christmas paper, had remained a silent reminder of his heartbreak from 47 years ago. Emily, his high school sweetheart, had left him right before their final Christmas together. They had been inseparable, young and wild with love, sharing dreams about their future. They'd even shared their first time together, which made the betrayal that followed all the more painful. Emily had kissed another boy, someone Jules didn't even know, at the local mall. A brief, careless mistake on her part, but it shattered him. The breakup that followed was inevitable, but Jules had never quite gotten over it. He was head over heels in love with Emily, and the hurt ran deep. She had given him a gift right before everything fell apart, a small, neatly wrapped package that she had handed him just a few days before Christmas. It was supposed to be a symbol of their love, but it became a haunting relic of his heartache. At first, Jules didn't open it because he couldn't bring himself to face what was inside. Maybe it was a symbol of hope, a part of him wishing that if he didn't unwrap the gift, their story wasn't fully over. Emily would come back, and they'd share the moment together, but she never did. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and soon years had passed. The unopened gift was left under his Christmas tree that first year after the breakup, almost as if he were waiting for her return. When she didn't come, he still couldn't bring himself to throw it away. Over time, Jules moved on, or so it seemed. He married, built a life, had two beautiful children. His wife knew about the gift, of course. It became a sort of inside joke in their family. Every Christmas, as the family gathered around the tree, Jules would point to the small, tattered package and say, "Maybe this is the year I'll open it." They'd all laugh, though they all secretly wondered what was inside. It was a reminder of his past, yes, but more than that, it had become a quirky symbol of the passage of time. The gift hadn't defined him. He'd found happiness, real happiness, but he kept it close because it reminded him of the boy he had once been. That young man who had once believed in forever with a girl named Emily. But this year, something felt different. Jules, now in his 60s, with graying hair and the wisdom that comes with age, decided it was finally time. His children, now adults themselves, were gathered around him, along with his grandchildren. The air was filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of pine from the tree. Jules reached under the tree and picked up the small box, the wrapping paper now brittle from years of being handled, but never opened. The room fell silent as he slowly peeled away the paper. Even his wife watched with curious anticipation, despite having heard the story so many times over the years. As the last piece of tape gave way, Jules opened the box and froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. Inside was a small, handwritten note from Emily. It read, "Jules, I've been holding onto this secret for a while, and I don't know how to tell you face to face, so I'm putting it here. I'm late. I think I might be pregnant. I'm scared, but I know we'll figure this out together, no matter what. I love you." Jules sat back, stunned, as the room around him buzzed with murmurs of shock. A pregnancy, but there was no baby, no follow-up, no explanation. The relationship had ended shortly after that Christmas. Had Emily known she wasn't pregnant and just never told him, or was it something else? Jules couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to the story he never knew. In the end, the unopened gift wasn't just a relic of a lost relationship, it was a mystery. Emily had carried this secret with her, and Jules had unknowingly carried it, too, for nearly 5 decades. The note left him with more questions than answers, but there was also a strange sense of closure. The gift, which had symbolized so much heartache and longing, had now turned into a revelation, a piece of his past that finally made sense. It was then that Jules realized he had moved on, and maybe it was time to let the past rest. He folded the note carefully, tucked it back in the box, and placed it gently on the mantel. It was no longer a source of sadness, but rather a reminder of life's unpredictability and how much he had grown since the days of high school heartbreak. As the weight of the revelation settled in, Jules took a deep breath, absorbing the decades of mystery that had just been unlocked. His family, wide-eyed and waiting for his reaction, shifted uneasily around the room. They had never expected this moment this silly, long-held tradition would lead to something so profoundly personal and unexpected. Jules' wife, Carol, who had always known about the gift but never pushed him to open it, quietly reached for his hand. She didn't need to say anything. Her touch was steady, reassuring, reminding him of the life they'd built together, of the love that had outlasted his teenage heartbreak. "Are you okay, Dad?" one of his daughters asked, her voice soft with concern. Jules smiled, though it was a bittersweet one. "Yeah," he nodded slowly, his mind racing with questions he'd never be able to ask. "I think I am." The room exhaled with him, the tension easing, but Jules knew his mind would linger on the note for a long time to come. What had happened to Emily after their breakup? Had she ever found out for sure if she was pregnant? Had she gone through it alone, or had she confided in someone else? He thought about the boy she had kissed at the mall, the boy who had shattered his world at the time. Did he know? Were they still in touch, or had they drifted apart, just as he and Emily had? For a moment, Jules considered reaching out to Emily. Maybe she was still out there, living her own life, perhaps with her own family. Maybe she had forgotten all about him, or maybe she hadn't. The idea was tempting, but Jules quickly shook it off. After all, what would it change? The gift, the note, it was a fragment of a life that was no longer his. He had his own family, his own joys and struggles, and that was more than enough. Later that night, as the festivities wound down and the children and grandchildren drifted off to their beds, Jules sat by the fireplace with Carol. The gift box, now empty, sat on the mantel in front of them, a quiet symbol of all the untold stories that had made up his life. "You think she ever told anyone?" Jules asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Carol thought for a moment before answering, her gaze steady. "Maybe, or maybe she was as scared and confused as you were." Jules nodded. He'd never thought about it that way. At the time, his world had been so small, so focused on his own pain that he hadn't considered what Emily might have been going through. It was easy to forget that other people's lives were just as complicated and messy as his own. "I wonder what life would have been like if things had gone differently," he mused, his mind wandering through the alternate paths his life could have taken. Carol smiled gently, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We all have our what-ifs, but in the end, what matters is where we are, not where we could have been." Jules looked at her, feeling a surge of gratitude for the life they had built together. Carol was right. His past, with all its heartbreak and mystery, had shaped him into the man he was today, but it didn't define him. What defined him was the love they had shared, the family they had raised, and the quiet moments like this one, where he could sit in peace with the woman who had stood by him through it all. As the fire crackled softly, Jules felt a sense of closure wash over him. He had spent so many years wondering about Emily, about that unopened gift, and what it all meant. Now he knew, and strangely, that knowledge didn't weigh him down. Instead, it freed him. The past, with all its unanswered questions, was just that, the past. And the future, with all its potential, was still unfolding, one quiet, beautiful moment at a time. Jules stood up, walked over to the mantel, and carefully picked up the empty box. He held it in his hands for a moment longer, then turned and looked at Carol. "I think it's time to let this go," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Carol smiled, nodding in agreement. "I think so too." Together, they walked out to the porch, where the cool night air wrapped around them like a comforting embrace. Jules gently placed the box in the recycling bin, watching as it joined the remnants of wrapping paper and holiday leftovers. It was just a box, after all, just paper and cardboard. But the act of letting it go felt like releasing a part of himself that had been trapped in the past for far too long. As they stood there in the quiet night, the stars twinkling overhead, Jules turned to Carol and took her hand. "Merry Christmas," he whispered. "Merry Christmas," she replied, squeezing his hand gently. And for the first time in 47 years, Jules felt like he was truly ready to move forward, unburdened, free, and content with the life he had lived and the love he had found. The night was peaceful, with the faint glow of holiday lights twinkling from the neighbors' homes. Jules and Carol stood on the porch for a while, their hands intertwined, watching the quiet street before them. It was a perfect moment of stillness after the emotional storm that had swept through their evening. Jules felt lighter, as if releasing the box, and its secrets had lifted something off his chest that he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying all these years. He thought back to his younger self, the boy who had loved Emily so intensely, who had been heartbroken by her betrayal, and who had, for decades, wondered what if the gift had been a tether to that time, a reminder of a dream that had never been fulfilled. And now it was finally over. As they walked back inside, Jules caught a glimpse of his children's old Christmas stockings still hanging by the fireplace. He chuckled softly to himself. Life had a funny way of surprising you. What had started as a simple opening of an old gift had turned into a night of reflection and, in many ways, a turning point. The next morning, Jules was up early. The house was still quiet, save for the occasional creak of floorboards as the heating kicked in. He made his way to the kitchen, the soft glow of the early sun filtering through the window, casting a warm light on the room. As he brewed his coffee, he couldn't stop thinking about Emily and that note. He didn't feel sadness, just curiosity. He wondered how her life had turned out, if she had ever thought about him after all these years, if she had found happiness. With his coffee in hand, Jules sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the snow-covered yard. He absent-mindedly scrolled through his phone until he did something he hadn't done in decades. He searched for Emily. The internet made it easier than he thought. It didn't take long before her name popped up in a list of results. There she was, older now, of course, but unmistakably Emily. Her profile picture on one of the social media platforms showed her smiling with a group of people, presumably her family. Jules' heart fluttered a little. She looked happy, and that brought him peace. He hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the screen. Should he reach out? What would he even say? Finally, he made a decision. No, this wasn't a chapter that needed reopening. The note had given him closure, but it didn't mean he had to rekindle something from so long ago. They had both moved on with their lives, and that was the way it was supposed to be. He closed his phone and set it aside. Jules wasn't the same person he had been all those years ago, and Emily wasn't the same girl. Their story had ended, and he was content with where his own journey had taken him. He had love, family, and a lifetime of memories that filled his heart more than any long-lost relationship ever could. Later that day, as the family gathered for Christmas dinner, Jules found himself surrounded by the sounds of laughter, conversation, and warmth. His children were sharing stories, their kids running around the living room, and Carol was in the kitchen preparing the final touches on the meal. It was a picture of joy and contentment, the kind of life that couldn't be measured by old heartaches. At some point, his daughter, Sarah, sat down beside him. She gave him a knowing look, the kind only a child who had grown up with the story of the unopened gift could give. "You okay, Dad?" she asked, her voice gentle. Jules smiled, nodding. "Yeah, I'm good, really good." Sarah leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "What was in the box? You never told us." Jules considered for a moment, then chuckled softly. "It was a note," he said simply. "A note from Emily." She thought she might have been pregnant. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Seriously? Wow, that's a lot." "It was," Jules admitted, "but it's in the past now. I'm just glad I finally opened it." Sarah smiled and rested her hand on her dad's arm. "I'm glad you did too. Maybe it's time to let that chapter go, huh?" Jules nodded, feeling an immense sense of peace. "Yeah, it is." As the evening went on, the gift and the note faded into the background. Jules had thought that opening it would bring back a flood of memories and regrets, but instead, it had given him the closure he never knew he needed. The heartache of his youth was just one piece of the puzzle that made up his life, and now it had found its place along with all the joy, love, and lessons that came after. Later that night, as Jules and Carol prepared for bed, Jules felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life he had built, for the people who loved him, and for the journey he had traveled. The unopened gift had been a mystery for decades, but now that it was opened, he realized the real gift had been his life, the life he had chosen and lived fully, even with its twists and turns. As he drifted off to sleep, Jules knew that his heart had finally made peace with the past. And in that peace, he found something far more precious than any gift he could have imagined. He found the beauty of letting go.